Oh, I'm as ready as I'm going to be.
Then you're going to press the start recording again.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, I've already done that. All right, and I hope it registers with you too. Good morning, everybody. A few little adjustments to pass through. Uh, although I was working the other day on GoToMeeting, and I found there were about 20 different steps that one had to take before one could get a satisfactory beginning to the program. So Zoom is much better in that respect. Well, I'd like to welcome you and this fine morning here in Finland, where it's gray and cold. We're up north. And we'll begin with the Lords of Liberation again. And we'll keep the pressure on that for a while as everything will grow more intense in this. I'm simply going to call it a battle for democracy, and what the Tibetan basically said, and we don't know if it's right now, but it would be a fighting to the last ditch of the forces of materialism. So we call it the last ditch stand, and it kind of reminds you of trench warfare in the First World War. It was different than later. And I think we know what to do here. We will concentrate and together as one invoke these mighty powers, doing so deliberately rather than inchoately or formlessly when things just get so bad for human beings that they just have to reach up. That's how Master Moria described it. When you're surrounded, I mean, it really hasn't happened yet, but should it happen, when you're surrounded, the only way that liberation comes is upward. Let the Lords of Liberation issue forth. Let them bring succor to the sons of men. Let the rider from the secret place come forth, and coming save. Come forth, O mighty one. Let the souls of men awaken to the light, and may they stand with massed intent. Let the fiat of the Lord go forth. The end of woe has come. Come forth, O mighty one. The hour of service of the saving force has now arrived. Let it be spread abroad, O mighty one. Let love, or light and love, and power, and death, fulfill the purpose of the coming one. The will to save is here. The love to carry forth the work is widely spread abroad. The active aid of all who know the truth is also here. Come forth, O Mighty One, and blend these three. Construct a great defending wall. The rule of evil now must end. This ability to stand with massed intent, it will gather and become stronger in humanity. It has so much to do with the power of Vulcan and the spiritual will, which is certainly not yet fully active in humanity. The planet has not been discovered. And there is a kind of synchronicity between the discovery of a planet and the readiness of humanity to take the quality of the planet and begin to express it. So I think we begin to see little flickers of mass intent. I was reading, in this battle for democracy, and by the way, it is said that many of the authoritarian forces are looking with apprehension upon the American election, because if the tendency towards democracy wins, their own position is threatened. But you see these people coming out, and they, with lines to vote as far as the eye can see, and coming out early and waiting for 8 hours, 10 hours, I don't know how many hours, in line to vote, so that their vote, counts. And it has the obstructive forces alarmed. Well, Master Kuthumi tells us that a few drops of rain do not make a monsoon, but they presage it. So it's an anticipation of what's coming. And humanity is going to learn to stand on the side of the good in a massed manner, having invoked the spiritual will and its evocation strengthening them, and the intention of the Aquarian age to really be a time when entry into the fifth kingdom for so many human beings, and in a general way for the whole race, will take place. This ability to stand with massed intent. So let us keep up this, whatever our ray may be, we all have will. Let's try to understand what it is. Let's have our willingness keenly activated, our willingness to do what must be done. And we can carry that forward and make the rising of humanity a process which is not unconscionably delayed. I'd like to welcome, well, my gratitude to Michael, always keeping us on track here, and Tuya. and Veronica, Annette, Catherine, Cindy, Karen, Leah, Leslie, Martine, Natney, Risto, Tia, Vera, and Lori. That's what we have so far. You know, sometimes when these are done in the morning, I well know, you know, if the hours are late, one just has to discipline the body and get it out there and ready to do what must be done. To forego peace, to forfeit rest, and in the stress of pain to lose myself and find myself, thus entering into peace. This is the mantra of aspiration, and you know, in the arcane school, it's the very first thing you're given, basically, and very sixth ray thing, very mobilizing, I would say. So welcome. Now, you know, always when it comes to this kind of program, I approach with a little bit of trepidation because I find it's such an abstract thing, so simple in some ways, and so abstract in other ways. It really gives us a workout in the abstract mind, but it's more than that because I was, you know, I've studied all of this a long time, but the other day I ran into two definitions of the abstract mind, which is our main point of cultivation during the coming 2,000 years, the sixth sub-race of the fifth root race. Not yet full intuition, but the abstract mind. And the lowest part of the spiritual triad also gives us pure reason, or the purest form of reasoning, but DK actually called it pure reason. And that's new to me. Whereas what occurs on the Buddhic plane, which is the plane of transcendental mind, is usually the place where pure reason as straight knowledge is to be found. So there are two approaches to pure reason, through the abstract mind and through the intuition, and one can lead to the other with the building of the Antakarana. So we're getting a workout there, and so many of our thoughts are ready-made thoughts. You might almost say our prejudgments, our prejudices work against the kinds of apprehensions that the abstract mind can reveal. The kind of states of consciousness which pure reason can reveal. We have some kind of ready response. But if it comes up immediately, well, it may be good. But on the other hand, it may just be what's floating around, so to speak. And a ready response, which is not apt, not suitable, simply there and ready to take its place in our consciousness instead of what might come if we waited a little longer and were a bit more careful. I've been sending some of these seed thoughts out to you. Maybe at the moment things are so pressureful, but not every day, but still often enough for you to ponder upon them in the hope that a new type of consciousness can begin to take place for all of us. Well, there's just a lot of different ray methods of reaching that new type of consciousness. And we don't know what is your way. Maybe none of us really knows for sure what will be revealed to us in terms of our way of reaching the new consciousness. But every ray has its method. In my book on the monad, I think it's called On the Monad, it's an e-book, I kind of get into the different ways that one can approach monadic awareness according to the different rays and sub-rays. I mean, always thoughts about these things are being modified because, you know, the longer you stay with it, the more you see, and your best approximations from before no longer serve. So always something new, some insight, some trigger phrase or word, which is, you know, like your own special mantra, may dawn upon you, and it may serve for a time, and then it no longer serves. Then you have to find a discontent arises within you, and you know you're not quite grasping it. There's a more secure grasp possible, and so you reapply yourself to this form of abstract meditation. So I'm going to go through, you know, this is going to be a kind of reflection. It's not just for intellectual apprehension. The intellect is involved, of course, but it's a kind of reflective meditation. And any one of these little seeds could require a fair amount of time to penetrate. So kind of sit with things a little bit. And, you know, take notes if something comes to you that, some impression, let's say, that seems worth your further consideration. One has to be vigilant. Sometimes, you know, working with this kind of class, it almost makes the other classes look easy, because what we're pondering in other classes is so definite. It's items of esoteric knowledge, which to the master are proven, and in our trust for the master are given to us and make their impression, and we ponder likewise on some rather definite condition or situation or relationship. But this is elusive. You know, it slips away from you, frankly. And it's only as the thirst for what is beneath the surface begins to be experienced that you'll go through the subtle steps that may take you, me, into altered states of consciousness which normally we don't engage in. So let's have our kind of reflective meditation. And we'll dwell with certain ideas and You can't force it. It's just what comes to you. If this language uh, is evocative at all for you. So first, a little bit in the silence, with some almost 20 of us here now, just into the silence, which is synthesis. We're kind of establishing our community of consciousness, our community of being together. And together with the energy and presence of the group, we ponder some ideas. The one state which all perceptions share is presence. The one state which all perceptions share is presence. Now, you can understand that any one of these little seeds we could reflect on for a long time. As absolute infinitude, or as in, either way you want to look at it, absolute infinitude, which is supra-universal, there is no such thing as absence, except in one particular. In supra-universal absolute infinitude, inconceivable, of course, to us. There is no such thing as absence. And this is why Baruch Spinoza negated negation as non-existent in his 6 postulates that began his book on the ethics, as he calls it. He was a member of hierarchy, DK tells us. In absolute infinitude, which is above and beyond the universe, there is no such thing as absence, presence and absence, you see. Let me say, it is the presence in which, and you can't really say in, there is no absence. Except in one particular. The only absence or let's call it non-existence is non-being. Or non-presence. The only absence or non-existence is non-being or non-presence. In other words, what is absent is the possibility of non-existence. In other words, or self-negation. It cannot be that being is not. And that would be the ultimate form of negation, the ultimate nihilism, the ultimate nothingness, which is not no-thingness. So I just want to say nothingness is not no-thingness, and no-thingness is not nothingness. So we cannot deny, in Blavatsky's words, beingness. Beingness is always present. And the void of no thingness is always utterly complete. We can say, in a way, then, that nothing is ever missing. Except the denial of its presence. Nothing is ever missing, absent, except the denial of its presence. It is complete always. It is never absent. Forever it is present. And I'll stretch here. Forever present, though non-self-perceived. The Absolute does not perceive. The transcendental deity, transuniversal deity, perceives. The very substance of ourself is forever uncaused, undiminished, ever present, unannihilatable. And we can never stop being the presence, or let me call it the supra universal presence. The deepest identity possible. externally, the inner God, and that which transcends infinitely, the inner God. Nothing is missing from absolute infinitude except self-negation. It cannot be that it is not. Thus, it cannot be that you are not. You, I, are always, always present, presence. We are never the non-existent absence. This, what, excuse me. I hope I find it. That's not it. I'll get there. Yeah. Um, mhm. So this philosophy, I'll call it by name. This philosophy is ultimate positivism. immortal, immutable, ineradicable, inextinguishable, never absent, always present. You, I, it, that. Thus, absoluteness is utter completeness. And you and I are utter completeness, essentially. And forever. Without beginning or end. You and I. The apparent you and I, and anything perceivable, is essentially utter completeness forever, without beginning and without end. And absoluteness is utter with respect to unarticulated non-otherness. There's nothing else. Or maybe I had better say, I'm going to pause on this one. I'll come back to this. But it is the one without a second. There is no number two. As a matter of fact, in a way, there's no number one. Because the minute you unitize something, you bound it. So this one needs work. Zeroness. Zeroness unbounded. The boundless, immutable principle. to say impossible non-otherness, or impossible utterness. And yet, exercising your imagination, or whatever faculty we have, can we really imagine completeness unbounded? So, to imagine is bind and bound. Usually, we normally think of extension, but extension does not exist. Whether in space or time. And who finds absoluteness finds the only self that ever is, was, or can be. Can the boundless differentiation be grasped by any faculty simultaneously? An absolute articulated absolute infinitude be grasped by any faculty simultaneously? And certainly no faculty of man. only by the super-universal, or supra-universal, transcendental deity in the state of articulated self-observation. Then articulated absolute infinitude can be grasped simultaneously. Though articulation, i.e. differentiation, is ultimately illusory. This is another way of saying absolute God knows itself in all its parts. And we are that too. The presence of anything transcends its quality and is ineradicable and identical with the presence of anything else. Thus, presence, presence, presence foremost. Which is another way of saying banish differentiation from your perception. Not always, obviously, but when there is illusory time to do so. Only the heart knows the presence. The I does not. This is the approach to synthesis through identification. Be what you see. And all that is seen by the transcendental, or all that is self-seen by the transcendental deity. If you perceive it, you are it. And even what you do not perceive in your limited state, because it is self-perceived by the transcendental deity, you are it. Whatever is self-perceived by the transcendental deity, you are that. Whatever. All this is the life beyond differentiation, through identification. Okay, friends. So obviously, as I went over it myself, I was kind of wondering sometimes why I had written what I wrote. But in any case, a little pondering will clarify. Now, this language may not be your language, and you may find your own way to express similar apprehensions I just offer you what is meaningful to me, which is all one can do at this time, at this stage. And obviously, we're pondering ultimates here. We're taking the mental process into the field of non-differentiation. And we're not just stopping at the mind, we're going into the heart space, which is Buddhic and beyond, Buddhic monadic. The monad, remember, is on the same subplane as the etheric heart center of the solar logos. So it doesn't just stop at the human heart, The heart is the organ of the apprehension of reality. And I think, Master Moria's book on heart, much of it, maybe the parts written by him, as DK would say, grasps that. It's the universal organ and even the trans-universal organ. So, in the arcane school, in the old days when we dug down in those lesson sets that Alice Bailey had prepared when she had an association with Helena Rorick, I think they both worked in the same building on 42nd Street, something like that. She had one set called The Doctrine of the Eye, and the other was called The Doctrine of the Heart. So, we're not talking about sentimental affection, we're talking about the organ of universal apprehension and the organ of supra-universal apprehension, the heart of the absolute deity. So the eye differentiates and the heart synthesizes. I think we're all looking for, in our present state, a kind of enlightenment. We can call it Satori or enlightenment or Eureka or whatever, It's kind of the beginning at the first solar initiation. And it begins to look like a different world when we reach that point. And it takes us beyond our entrapment in differentiation or articulation. They're basically the same word. To differentiate, to articulate, it means, to divide up and separate one thing from another. It's the realm of number rather than the realm of no number or the absolute zero. We're not really going to get closer to the absolute zero through the I alone. The heart, the whole chain of hearts has to be involved, and the monad is a heart center. If you read carefully, you'll see that there is a 12-fold higher center in the esoteric healing book, and it is the monad. So, I think we can meditate here in this way, these kind of 14 points, and we can change our consciousness. Now, like I say, I'm not dogmatic about this. There's lots of ray ways to do it. Obviously, this one is employing the abstract mind quite a bit, and pure reason of the abstract mind, and maybe the pure reason of the intuition sometimes. Everyone finds their way in their own way. Different monadic rays will find their way in different ways. But the exercise of the monadic ray, though it seems to be so far beyond possibility of apprehension, is all about life and simplicity and beingness. Words, what are words? But it's all about the utter simplicity of things. And that's why the Tibetan says on page 518 of Dina 2, he says, simplicity governs the way into Shambhala. Now, I know all this looks pretty complex in search of the simple. Maybe it's the third ray method, and all these words don't have to be used, depending on how you get there. But to get there, only to discover that you are there, is the important thing. Repeatedly. That's the game we seem to play with the appearing and disappearing universes. There is no elsewhere, okay? But in the Mahamaya, there seems to be an elsewhere. The universe is an elsewhere, an illusory elsewhere. Do I dare put that down? Any universe is an illusory elsewhere. Well, it doesn't really exist. There is no elsewhere. There is no location. There is no relativity. This whole thing, all this is trans-relational and beyond relativity. Now, it's not practical in the world of relativity to always think of non-relativity. We have to always deal with the Maya, always, cyclically. But, to get to the absolute truth, it is trans-relativistic. And we're just not used to thinking outside of relativism, which is why I said, that anything that you perceive is identical in that it shares non-relativism But of course, to make this a more constant presence in our consciousness, it requires living with it and pursuing it, and all those customary words that are used when the part thinks about the whole. So we don't expect results overnight. We don't expect any kind of fullness of understanding overnight. We just stay with it. Meanwhile, living our relational lives, live, love, and learn, we just keep going with that. And meanwhile, the non-relativity grows. And it really flips the consciousness, which is eventually leading to the initiate consciousness. All of the masters and Chohans of the seventh degree and beyond, they have this flipped consciousness. They are no longer slaves of relativity. Okay, your turn.
Well, Michael, there are a number of comments, questions written in the chat box.
Okay.
Beginning with Frederick, writing, "Is the otherness the quality of our self being complete?" Quote, "Impossible otherness," unquote, is often associated with thought of exclusion in psychology.
Okay, let's see if I can understand well enough. You know what I'm going to do? While you're reading it, Michael, I'm going to use my eye, the doctrine of the eye.
Yes, is the otherness the quality of our self being complete? And the reference to impossible otherness often associated with thought of exclusion in psychology.
Otherness is complete, and it is the completeness of the articulated trans-universal self, and it is the completeness of the unarticulated absoluteness or trans-universal self. And maybe I'll have to refine the words, but I'm saying basically that otherness is impossible. And there's nothing other to exclude or include. Nothing real, other, to talk about including or excluding. We'll have to go beyond human psychology in this. The utterness has a title, a name, many names. The one without a second one, the one without a second. So there is no other to include or exclude. It's out of all relation with anything else because there just isn't anything else, which is why it's impossible. Now, we can say, can a word like impossible really be applied? Because in a way, everything is possible, except for the non-being of the source of all possibility. That's the one, I think, impossibility. But I call it impossible otherness because there just isn't anything other to exclude or include. So we have to begin, the opposite of not this, not that, not this, not that, is this too, this too, this too, this too. Also this, also this, also that, all inclusive. And yet, those things or whatever that seem to be included in the all inclusiveness are not really other. They are essentially and absolutely the one without a second. Or, I'm going to work on another thought about that, the zero without the one. Blavatsky really does deal with that, the realm of no number and the realm of number. So, there can be a question even, can the otherness be numbered as a one, or is there a special state of absolute zero, which is somehow not numbered? Because when you think of something, you number it. I've sometimes said before that to think is to thing. When you think, you thing. And this is the no thing. So, you get into some kind of subtle issue there, but trying to make it simple. My old teacher used to say to me, this is it. This is it. So simple that you just wonder if you can get it. Meaning there's nothing that's not it. Will eliminate the objectivity of the idea of it, this and, this and that. But everything around is the non-other. There is no other. And, you have to ponder on the impossibility of otherness. And I think even as I'm starting to do that right now, I'm getting some pretty weird apprehensions. Impossibility of otherness. Our whole life is based on otherness, relativity, being surrounded by the other. But what if there is no other? And that's why the Tibetan is kind of careful at one point when he does kind of talk about these things, and he right away eliminates this and that. I've got to find that reference. It's in the rays and the initiations. And he's trying to show the illusions that people usually encounter when they think about oneness. So I'll try to dig that up, because you can see that basically he knows all these things, but he's concentrating on the world of relativity and Maya, because that's where we are and we've got to deal with that. But every once in a while, between the cracks, the non-other comes in, the non-duality, we might say. And you have to talk about non-duality in a different way. Otherwise, it's so easy to fall into the trap of generating dualism while you're talking about non-duality. Anyway, I despair of making my inchoate meaning meaningful, but that's how I see it. And I would even study After having said this in response to your question, I will go back myself and study what I said. One really has to learn to ponder until the flip comes, the change comes. There's no exclusion or inclusion because there's nothing else to exclude or include. That's how I see it.
Next from Frederick, about infinitude and absolute. What about the connection between infinitude and the quantum cosmologic of the absolute? And he references The Truly Infinite Universe, Hegel, Hawking, and the Quantum Cosmologic of Absolute by David James Stewart.
Well, that's interesting. I don't know. I'd have to get into his language to see what I even think. The question is there such a thing as relationship? And, every time I hear the word quantum, you know how it's used to cover a multitude of sins. I'd like to see that. I'd like to understand how that word fits when talking about absoluteness. I'd like to see how far these authors carry the idea of transuniversal. I remember a man at the CERN facility. Is it, France, Sweden, France, Switzerland, somewhere in there. He was one of these very high-level fifth-rate guys, and they said, well, what about before the Big Bang? And he actually went so far as to say, well, of course, there must be something. And he actually, he didn't stop with the universe being the entirety, because it just isn't in esotericism. So, in order for me to see at least what is the intellectual connection between what you're proposing, I'd have to get into the thought, and I'd have to see how the word quantum is used. And I don't believe in infinite universes. In an infinite universe, to me, every universe is a finitude. And so now we will have to define what we mean by universe. And when I see phrases like the quantum cosmologic of what, the absolute, or of absolute, I guess, they're making it into a thing, the absolute, I would guess. I want to know what the thesis is. So basically, I'm saying I can't answer the question until I know more, but right away, I would take exception to the truly infinite universe. To me, it does not exist. The cyclic reappearance of the self-perception of the transuniversal deity does exist, and that is a universe. The finitized self-perception of the transuniversal deity is a universe. Now, these thinkers, strong on the fifth ray, would come to me and say, what the heck do you mean by that? And so we'd have to compare languages, and they might refer to a lot of intra-universal factors, which I am hardly doing. I'm dealing with the theory of emanation through reductive self-perception. I'm using a third ray approach, and it would require, but right away, I would take exception and argue and discuss on the truly infinite universe, which I think does not exist. Okay, and there's a bit more, isn't there?
Yes, continuing on, what about, quote, be what you perceive, unquote, as the perception comes from our inner question mark. And our vision can be polluted, reference glamour.
Yeah, I'm not looking for the recognition of quality. In my mind, you can perceive what is true or not true, and that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the essence of anything perceived, whether true or not true, whether good or evil, whether useful or useless. There's a level involving the fact that it is a self-perception, which simply makes it real. Like, in other words, I'm going to say, well, maybe the discussion, I'm going to say that every perception is essentially real, though not essentially real within context. In other words, I'm looking for the existential reality of whatever is perceived, good, bad, up, down, high, low, good, evil. It doesn't make any difference. There is a level there's a level of reality that is beyond relativity and beyond good and evil. And that's what I mean. Now, in the world of Mahamaya, you obviously have to discriminate as to quality, and will never make it through the game of retractive emanation. I'll have to think of a word for, that return, if we don't qualify and discriminate between what has quality and what doesn't, what is good according to the archetype of a universe and what isn't. We have to differentiate. But I'm also now talking about non-differential perception. Speaking, I just have to write a couple of things down. Non-differential perception, which is non-differential self in universe, self-perception. So, I'm taking it so far away from relativity that it's almost hard to think, use examples from the relative world to try to grasp what I'm trying to hint at here. And from our inner what, you see, from our, we can call it the inner true being or the monad, and we can call it the heart of the monad, perception coming from the heart of the monad, self-perception coming from the heart of the monad. So I am detaching this kind of perception or infuception from normal relativistic perception and detaching it to a very great degree, to such a degree that all perceptions are identical. Wow, all perceptions are identical. Now that sounds like nonsense unless this heart perception is activated, and the monad is the heart. So, it would take hours for us to maybe try to clarify some of this, but those are a few thoughts that I get in response to what you have said. I don't care if it's glamorous. I don't care if it's illusory. I don't care if it's myopic. It's real in the sense of being the same as everything else. Now that's hard to grasp for many people.
And Frederick has his hand raised. You can unmute yourself, please.
Yes. Gratitude for your inspiration today. In fact, be what you see was related to what you wrote about be what you see, because the visual was from be what you see, and perception could be from be what you perceive.
Yeah, be what you perceive, be what you register. I just use the word see as a simple word for any kind of perceptual registration. It's just, to make a little catchy phrase, you might say. The word see means a perceptual registration. I don't really mean, the eye per se. Any kind of noticing, isolation of any kind of registration coming from the act of perception is to me seeing. Even hearing is seeing. Even tasting is seeing. You see the generic way I'm using that term.
Gratitude.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. See generically. I realize, look, it's no easy thing for any of us to be pulled into the abstract mind, into the mind of the triad and beyond. It's just not how we are, usually, but it's how the masters are, because they've managed, and how the still higher beings are, we can imagine. But, this is all a big stretch for little emanations such as we seem to be. And, when you stretch something, there's possibly some pains involved, some growing pains in the consciousness. So we're experimenting with a stretch into a different form of perception. And, it has value, and there's going to be a lot of inaccuracies of language and, inaccuracies of how we put our thoughts together and all that. But the general task is of ultimate value, final value. So thank you. Okay.
And then the comment again from Frederick. As transcendence becomes imminent, what about the evolution of the self-seen and the self-perception?
Okay, well, we are in the realm of abstraction now. the level of perceived sameness never changes. I don't care if it's high or low, or light years beyond us, or light years behind us. It's always the same. But what does evolve within the world of Mahamaya, or the world of the universe, is that the sensitivity of self-seeingness evolves. Let me put that down. The yeah, the sensitivity of self-seeingness evolves. So we know more and more, we love more and more, we have more and more power. That's what evolves. But now I want to say it, which I've lost friends over this one. Being never evolves. And you know, I honestly, I'm not joking, of course. Some people are so invested in thinking that this person, or even this soul, causal body, is what they are, that if you say to them, the real you is not evolving, they're going to really take offense. The Mahamayavic you, well, you know what I'm going to say. Mahamayavic, intra-universal you does evolve in its, let me call it apprehensibility. In other words, it can always see more, register more, love more, be more empowered. All that is evolution. But let me just say that only the apparent part can evolve. The reality can never evolve. No, hold on, capitals. EVOLV, and never change. When I capitalize things, basically, all caps generally means the trans-universal world. Capital first letter generally means intra-universal world in terms of the major factors, and lowercase, unless it's italics, generally means on the level of the world of man. I differentiate that way. But of course, I often fail because I get enthusiastic and want to put things in caps that if I was rigorous, I would not put in caps. But only the apparent part can evolve. Reality does not evolve. Being does not evolve. Only the ability to register being evolves within the part. So I'll go intra-universal. Only the ability to register being evolves within the part, but not, and now I'll just go into italics, plain and simple, not being, not Well, I'll say intra-universal, being itself. Or, let me be now ultimate, being itself. No evolution. Now, somewhere in Buddhism, it says, the Buddha, in his knowledge, knows that there is no path. But in his compassion for those who have to understand, he speaks of the path. Not the word path, you know what I mean, the general spiritual progress kind of thing. All of that is illusion. You're already there, essentially. But in the Mahamayavic universal world, that's where all the terms we usually use about the path and improvement and initiation and the vertical, etc., that's where that applies, but not to the world of the utter and to reality. Best I can do at the moment. Okay.
There are no hands raised, and we have a thank you from Martine.
Thank you, Martine. Well, thank you all. Look, we're in a community of thought together right now, and we're working our way out of partiality and relativity. That's what we are doing right now. We are working our way out of partiality, only spell, and relativity. Or I say oftentimes, to make it clear, relativity, because you have to have division to relate. And when there's no division, you have no relativity. So, what can I call these things? Intra-universal and trans-universal studies. And when I want to escape from my threefold system of all caps, capital first, or no caps, I often go to italics and I say it's none of the above. So I generalize through italics when I want to escape the noose of having to say, is this super-universal, intra-universal, or just in the world of man? Now, all of this seems very different from what Master DK is teaching us, but if you read between the lines, you do see that here and there, he points to what he has as the Master's vision. Now, there's just so many things right inside the universe that we have to master as we evolve our instrumental capacities. See what is evolving here. Whoop, that's pretty, okay, hold on. Studies. So what is evolving is our instrumental capacities. That's what evolves. In other words, our partness is evolving into wholeness, and that which is even beyond wholeness, zero-ness, that's what's evolving. And it will cyclically be so forever. What did, Master Shankara say? Most mysterious is Maya and forever. But, you know, if you really allow things to sink in, you know, those are potent words. Most mysterious is Maya, and forever, cyclically forever. So not only are we in it, we are it. See, being in or out, excluded, included, whatever, it's only on the way to truth. So I want to just say this. Whoop. Um, not only are we in it, but we are it. In and are. Different way of thinking, and you know, I don't recommend it for all the time, because otherwise we couldn't manage our myopic world, which we are compelled to do. But sometimes take a little illusory time off and allow the expansion and deepening of consciousness to have a chance to occur within you, within the usual you. The usual you and the unusual you. You know what I mean? There is, I'll stay away from italics. There is the usual, well, I'll put it this way. Maybe I won't stay away from italics. Usual you and the unusual you and the really unusual you. My three-tiered system. So, you know, thanks for coming on the journey, little journey here with me, because obviously, you know, look, I'm just working at it and sharing the results with you as clearly as I can, realizing that I am wanting in doing so. You know, I'm not really successful. I'm very partially successful, not really successful. But I believe it's of value, and just the way it is in Indian music, there's the notes, and then there's the bar from which they come. And the language too, Sanskrit, there's all the letters and the bar from which they come, from which they descend. So this class, if we can call it a class, is about the bar. And what comes out of the bar, what comes out of the bar is, of course, myopically important, but it's not important in this particular approach. It's the bar itself as the underlying source of all those notes, of all those letters. That's what's important. You've seen how Sanskrit is written and how even it's written that way in modern adaptations of that ancient language. So, you know, just to define the scope of what we're doing here, so we know why we're doing it. And don't say, well, what in the heck is all this? That's why we're doing it. To understand the bar from which all notes and all letters descend, to use a visual example. Okay, friends, then thank you for your presence, and let's do the great invocation, the normal one we use. And I have appreciation for all of you, and this morning, I think especially for Frederick, he really got into it. And the deeper you think, the more you challenge me to try to think deeply too in my responses to you. And do not despair, because you've been through this umpteen times, no definite number of times. You've been through this cyclically forever, always with some creative variation. Every universe is creatively different. And there's an infinitude of possibilities for the design of universes. But the one thing is the same. The whole has become the part, and the part has become the whole. Re-becomes the whole. Okay. From the point of light within the mind of God, let light stream forth into the minds of men. Let light descend on earth. From the point of love within the heart of God, let love stream forth into the hearts of men. May Christ return to earth. From the center where the will of God is known, let purpose guide the little wills of men, the purpose which the masters know and serve. From the center which we call the race of men, let the plan of love and light work out, and may it seal the door where evil dwells. Let light and love and power restore the plan on earth. To those of us who have left the Father's home, we all have, we'll find ourselves waiting at the door when we return. Tonight, reappearance of the Christ, our broadcast via YouTube. So maybe we'll see some of you there as may be possible for you. Meanwhile, onward in the world of Maya, trying to make sure that democracy has a chance. What a job. Okay, lots of love from Tuya and me and from the whole communications group. And what I'll do is I'll stop the recording, and Michael, well, whoever, let's see if that works. Yeah. Okay. So I'll stop the recording and Michael will stop the program. So here goes the recording, and we'll see you a little later. Bye-bye. Love you all.